Right, this is the first video for the Dino clutch. It's the removal, cleaning, and inspection, showing you how to do it. Before we start, I'd just like to summarize it because it's going to be kind of long, give you 3 tips I learned and 3 tricks. Tip number 1, use an impact wrench to remove the lower drop gear ring nut. That's torqued at 147 pounds, so the bearing that fits on here is really tight. Even though you have the ring nut off, it's going to be difficult to remove that. So tip number 2, use the bell housing, loosen it, and tap it from behind to coax the bearing forward and out so you can get it. Tip number 3, use a 13mm crow's feet wrench because this stud down here has a difficult nut to remove. So as an effect of the removal, cleaning, and inspection, we now have 3 results. Our clutch disc and pressure plate are toast. Our rear main engine seal is tight and dry, and the foreign object we saw around the clutch was the correct throw-out bearing carrier retaining spring. Result number 3 is our drop gears are showing serious abrasion resulting from corrosion or contamination. Welcome back to the Club Dino. We're inspecting the clutch system after a 1,000-mile drive, including a trip to Monterey and Las Vegas. Here is my symptoms are I'm not getting any slipping whatsoever, but I am getting some problematic engagement. That, rather than a worn disc, that might suggest bad bearings. The car hadn't been driven, the bearings get rusty, something gets scored, there's contamination in there. Or another thought would be that the rear main seal behind the flywheel has been compromised. It's slinging oil out, and this is typical on a car that's 50 years old, but also a lot of dust for a 16,500 mile car. And I'm seeing a part down there I can't identify. I've removed the wheel. I have removed the inner fender and the air filter. I have them right here. And we're starting to inspect what's going on. There are receipts from the prior owner about 2,000 miles ago about clutch adjustment problems. The prior receipts suggest a new clutch is required. And a lot of people are not familiar with the Dino clutch. It's actually quite affordable. For under $850 without even shopping around, you can get a pressure plate, a friction disc, which are Vallejo components, throw-out bearing, pilot bearing, O-ring seals for the casing, and a new shift boot. I'm also including a new clutch cable. This is the best one from Dino Parts, and all the other parts cost $750 that I just described. This clutch cable is about the same depending on your shipping costs from Europe. Can be up to about, actually more than the clutch itself. This is a fantastic piece, and it really glides, one-handed with the camera, but you can see it really has great action. The other things you'll need too are 2 new sump plugs, one for the transfer case and one for the gear oil. Possibly, if we have these, this is a front seal, this I believe is the rear seal. We have to have those, we have them on hand. And here, there are 2 shafts in the drop gears that we'll have to remove to get the intermediate housing, and a special tool was used to take them with a 27mm active. Now we have some cleaners that we'll be using too. This is a nasty area. You're gonna use your respirator equipment, safety gloves, and brake cleaner. We'll also have some Redline 7590 NS. This is the best gear oil in my mind too. Also, looking at the oil that's coming out from our recycle containers, it's pretty dirty. And there was quite a bit of accumulation on the magnetic end too. So let's get into this and do a clutch job on the Dino. Removing and securing the 2 5mm nuts that cover the clutch plate, remove the inspection plate, and look at the clutch. Here I see some foreign metallic in there, a curve. To me, it looks like the clutch retaining spring from the carrier. Let's explore further remove the oil and crack the case. All right, we're back working on the clutch, and I happened to notice one more task. We have a lot of black, dirty oil grease coming out of the hub. So I'll bet that's my inner wheel bearing, and I'll bet these wheel bearings suffer from the same fate of all the rubber and grease in this car after 50 years. It's old, hard, cracked, and well past its expiration date. A couple more things as we move into the clutch job. I've taken a paper towel just to show you how bad it's just the edge, and it is black. Black stuff's coming out of here. So there are a lot of issues that we have, and a good reason to open the clutch up. So let's start by those. But first, the task we'll need to do is relieve the spring here, as well as the connection to the linkage for the clutch cover. The linkage is secured with a very, very small circlip, and I have both straight, vertical, and horizontal circlip tools, but I found this was not the easiest way to do it. The easiest was to pull on one ear with a curved pick, slide a flathead screwdriver under one side of it, and put my finger on the top of the pin to keep the circlip from running, and then chase this screwdriver around. Bring it. I always have a magnet nearby too in case something goes awry. Okay, we can also see the boot here is also dried and cracked. Thank goodness we have a new one of those. But so I found that actually using a pick to pull the edge of the circlip and a flathead screwdriver to slip underneath it and chase it around was much easier than actually using the 90-degree pliers. Sometimes with the short areas and tight areas that we work in, the movements dictate what tools to use. A catch paper under it, a magnet, something too. But once you remove the part, make sure you put it in a safe location. I like these magnetic trays. And right now, I've got all the parts. I'm actually going counterclockwise as I lay them in. But keep a pattern and make it your way. You may have to remove this spring mechanism. It has just enough force that if you try and manhandle it from this angle, it's just too much. So I want to show you a trick that I use. Use a paracord, a come along, or something to hook under the back side of the spring. And now with your hand down here and pulling, you can get more leverage on it. Back, and it comes off. So once you remove the parts, make sure you take them off and put them in a safe place. For this, I'm going to be putting them in their own plastic bag and setting them off to the side where they can't gather any dust. We'll have to take the drop gear assembly off, remove the gears with the trans, pull them out, and then we will be able to pull the housing out and get to our clutch there. Only then will we find out what's with that. So let's start our major disassembly. Remove the cover. The bearings do not show any odd signs. It could use a little cleanup down here. There's no heat stress or anything on here, but there is a lot of this ugly white silicone. Very careful with this mating surface. So next step, unpeen this ring nut. Oh, that's another thing I found is I have the wrong ring nuts. Those are for the inner transmission. I do have the RNT 45 tool, which does sit on here. I notice this is quite tight. You need to lock one in. And also up here too. We can see. I'm really pleased to find out, even though I don't have the right ring nut tool, these turned out to be RNT 45s. They're nice and tight. There are no scorings on any of the faces of these big expensive bearings, and everything is really nice and tight in here, and clean too. Could get a little toothbrush in here, clean the stuff, but that's just the way it goes when you have a car that sits for a while. So I'm very pleased with what's come out here. Next step will be to be able to take the intermediate housing off. Right now it is captured with the input shaft of the transaxle by this ring nut, gear set, and snap rings inside that. So we have to unpeen this, pull the gear off. Right now I'm going to make a little time to clean up the face of the gears and take a red Sharpie and mark where the faces go, what things are facing. When we take this out, there are bearings inside there. We want to mark those. And I admit it, I'm putting everything in big plastic bags to keep them clean, and I'm going to mark them so that they will return to the same position they're supposed to be. Using your favorite cold chisel, destroy the pins in the nut. Never reuse these ring nuts. All right, jam your towel in there so they're nice and tight. Before adapter, you need to match up the nibs with the holes. Even give it a nice firm, because you need to come along with your 24mm impact, 1,600 foot-pounds of removing force. Hey! All right, okay, I had done that beforehand. That was prepped. Here it comes, and now we are ready to mark all these faces with our red pen. We will bag them and tag them as we pull them off, and keep everything sealed and clean as soon as it comes out. Once we remove the input shaft cog, there will be bearings, races, circlips, and spacers and washers we will also want to mark and note how they come out. Be very important. But first look here, man, everything looks really nice. There's no scoring, no pitting. A little bit of dirt on the lower cog, you know, that could be, I could take a toothbrush to that. And that's a future job coming up. All right, I bagged and sealed the center of the drop gear. Rotate it down and get the camera and just gently reach behind it and against. There's a little bit. Little rotation, and I want my hammer to oppose on the rib. Oh, I got another feel. You can see my contact point is here on the high point of the rib of the casting, not a finished surface. Let's see. Oh, I'm getting lucky. Look at this. Oh man, I like this car so much. There we go. Oh, I got another. Now, the other trick I'm doing off camera that I should mention right now, I've just got some oil, some extra oil in here, and I am squirting it. If there are little chunks, ooh, there was one, Rex, from there are little flecks of metal, little pieces of grit, anything that could impede the threads, the path, the channels. To remove it, I use oil. Oh man, that's gonna come from, there we go. All right, bag it and tag it side down. So that's what as soon as it comes off, it gets bagged, tagged, and set aside. So now we need to start marking the bearings here. Use your snap ring pliers to remove the snap ring. Once the snap ring's out, it's time to soak the inner bearing and pull the race and the rollers actually out of it. I like to hit it with a lot of the same lubricating oil to make sure anything that might be in my way is out of there and give me the best chance. Have to clean it up with a towel here, and then try a couple of plastic devices to just get a little pull on that out. Might have to use my metal pick. I'm having trouble releasing the bearing on the lower drop gear, so I'm going to use the Birdman trick of using the bell housing to bang it from the backside. So let's take the 19mm and 13mm nuts off the bell housing, but start first with the two starter bolts. Using a 17mm socket, remove the two starter mounting bolts marked Fiat 80. If these are in great condition, you may want to consider sending them out for plating. Once the starter bolts are removed, also proceed to take off the 6 19mm and then the 13mm, the smaller ones. I found those easy to do until I came to underneath the transfer case right here. There's one right back in there at the bottom of the case in which I had to use crow's foot's wrench. And you can see there's the crow's foot. That bolt right there. A very difficult one. That's a 13mm crow's foot wrench. That's your one tip. All other fasteners off really easy. I'm leaving one to hang there, but the rest I am bagging and tagging. Those will be nice and cleaned. We're going to decide on whether we'll have them plated or not. but the housing has this one final difficult bolt to remove. I found I had to jack up the case. Once you can break it free, you can use other tricks like a swivel or a wobble connection for it to get it up with your wrench. There's your tip. All of the nuts are off, even off the bottom here. You got that one, and they are all bagged and tagged. Unfortunately, I had to use freeze out. Birdman's trick of pulling the loose belt housing to release this bearing didn't quite work. I actually had to put a little wire spacer and slam that against the back just to free it. And I used a generous amount of freeze-off penetrating oil. But you can see this very important bearing is now releasing on me, and we're able to pull the bell housing off once that's removed, as well as the spacer collar behind it and the snap ring. Let's get to that. Well, the bearing slid out and the spacer behind it too. Now to get the snap ring in there, and then the bell housing will be free from the housing. All right, I used several plastic tools as pries from Body Tools, and the housing came off. There was no retaining ring on this inner edge there. That was an odd thing to see. I anticipated a clip. I will have to go to the parts book and see if this is like the Mundial in the YouTube videos. Removing the lower drop gear and the input shaft for the transaxle. I have watched several very generous YouTubers, Messenger, and both the Heli Doctor. They have V8 Mondials and 308s, so it's slightly different. And this threw me because I was looking for a part that is not on the Dino. If you watch their videos, thank them very much, but there is no circlip for the bearing. It is only a spacer, and I had to double check this in the parts book and show that the bearing has only a spacer and no circlip. And that seems reasonable because they have this nice big stop here. It was quite a pain in both the Messenger and, see, boom, next the bearing. One small thing I had to double check on is that there is no snap ring. If you ever move up to a 308, you will find the ring nut, the pulley, the bearing, the spacer, and then a snap ring. Of course, everybody comments how much of a pain it is to deal with that, so I guess we're really simplified and nicely done on a Dino. Look at that. I'm going to clean this up, degrease it, and get it ready to put back in. But that was the only thing that's different. A lot of dust, a lot of black dust for a 15,000 mile car, and somebody's been in here before, too. So let's get it out and start looking at it. 1974, it's dated. So this is the original clutch, April of 74, yeah. So let's see what we find in there. And bearing's a little noisy now. Spline doesn't look like it's been lubricated recently, but there is a lot of dirt in there. Look forward to seeing what our flywheel looks like. How do you know when your transfer case and gear set are matching numbers? Well, there's the number on the bell housing, 447, and it corresponds to the number on the drop gear cover, which corresponds to the number on the gear set, 447, as well as the lower and intermediate gear set are marked 447. Clean the bell housing with your favorite brake parts cleaner, degreaser, or soapy water mixture. Disassemble the fork as well as the clutch, throwout bearing and retaining ring, and also polish all surfaces here with quadruple zero wool. Pay attention to any high points. If you need to come back and deal with gouges, lightly file them down. We are now clean inside and outside thanks to about 7 cans of brake cleaner. I did buy 10, so 2.5 are left, 7.5. So that's what it takes to chase down all that dust and dirt and get it clean inside. I do have a little noise. I tried to flush downward, being tactical and not getting anything in, but hear that bearing's got grit in it. We're going to now open this up and use our other cans to flush out the bearing and pre-lube it. All right, taking the cleaned up bell housing to the workbench and started to inspect the bearings. Both the upper and lower drop gear bearings are showing signs of lack of lubrication. This is one of the problems with a low mileage car that's been sitting a long time. If you look at the ball bearings there, you can see surface rust on them. Again, I tried to clean them up and I still had that little bit of grinding sound, and when you look at it, you can actually see the races have a matte finish, just a little haze where they're traveling. And so that is a sign of either an abrasive that has been in there, contamination, or a lack of lubrication. One of the things that happens with a car that it sits for too long. Taking the bell housing out from the cleaning area and in onto our workbench, we've now polished everything, cleaned it, and used a lot of brake cleaner. The lower, the inner race here, as you can see, has a lot of matte finish, dulling finish on the inner race here, as you can see. It's not that much of a correspondence on the rollers, though there are some streaking that would infer contamination. And anyhow, you get abrasion like this from either lack of lubrication or contamination. And all of the power from your engine is going through this bearing. It's not bad. I could polish this up. Anyhow, I think this points to the new bearing needed here. I'm going to buy them from Ferrari Parts Exchange, which is a direct USA source to Superformance. And because this is almost usable again, oh gosh, that's so smooth. There's no ridges. There's nothing there except a light bouncing around. And I'm going to wait and see the bearing I get from Superformance. You know, Air 1 in 20 bearings I get, I refuse to use. There is an odd case where they're not exactly the same. So that's where I'm going to proceed today. We need, similarly, on the other side of the case, can I do it one-handed? Yes. This bearing has very light scoring. The center of the drop gear bearings are in fabulous shape. There's absolutely no sign of the scoring or anything, but there was external grease which was not expected in that black grease in there. So I think I'm going to replicate that. It's probably a factory thing, and I am going to pack this bearing as well as the other side of this bearing with grease. So I did flush this bearing from the other side, and I noticed a really great flow pattern from it as it dribbled out, and it should. That means oil coming from the slinging gear here will make it to the bearing behind it. So another great thing about this, I love this car. Take a look at our clutch throwout and carrier. Here's our old one. You can see extremely dirty, wet. And I've wiped this off a couple times too. It's ugly. Here's our new one. I've already cleaned up the clip. It's working great, and there's nice and tight. But let's go to the carrier itself. Now here we have an oil seal and an O-ring sealing system for your clutch throwout bearing carrier. Number one, you can see the D shape in the profile of the O-ring. It's toast. That should be perfectly round. It's been under compression for too long, and it's gone. Now, you have an oil seal in here, and I wanted to show you how I test them. I just take a rod and see how the new edge deforms as I roll that. Your hard edge here is backed with metal, so you're not going to get the same deformation, but this tells you the material is soft, supple, and available for sealing. Now we come to the old one here, and I want you to listen, because I've done this a couple times. As I push in, you'll hear a crack. Let's see if we can get that. Hear that? Crunch, crunch, crunch. See that? That has no flexibility. So it's time to order a new oil seal for here. And that's how you test how the seals are good. These are important because you do not want any fluid, any of the oil that lubricates the bearing in here to get to your disc. That'll compromise your disc. All right, back at the clutch side, I have not removed the clutch pressure plate and disc because I wanted to take a 3/8 inch socket and create a clutch alignment tool. Haven't been able to find a clutch alignment tool for a Dino, so I've been wrapping tape in two locations here. One for the pilot bearing and then one for the spline. So we've got the pressure plate now. Remove 6 Allen head screws from the circumference, and we can find out what's going on inside the clutch. Now with this asbestos in it, you'll want to don your respiration gear and your nitrile gloves. All right, we got the clutch, flywheel, and pressure plate off. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of heat stressing on the pressure plate and a similar discoloration. I hit this with brake cleaner, and you can really see ridges as well as feel high and low as you move across here. That's not even at all. So I'm going to take that out and get resurfaced. It was time for a clutch. As you can see, those rivets are coming up awfully fast. There's heat areas, there's uneven areas. At some time, you know, a Dino clutch can be quite stiff for some drivers. They don't understand it, and this is what happens. So both of those components are waiting to be replaced. We have found that there's no oil intrusion. Oil seal is good. I'm gonna see if I can clean the edge, just check it once. A little bit of a delay, so. Even with the best planning, we did not anticipate extra parts that were needed. So at this point, I'm going to conclude the video as a removal, cleaning, and inspection video. Make my purchase parts and wait for them to come in, something things out for plating, and I've got the flywheel off to Kelly's machine shop. Thanks very much for coming along. Look forward to part 2 where we put it all back together.